headliner. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners. We are getting ready to bang out some wide receiver start and sit information here in week 3. So hit the like button for me, subscribe if you're new here to the channel, and don't forget our rankings videos will always come out on Thursday before kickoff. So if you've got any questions between, hey, I've got a couple of guys that starts, who do I go with? Those rankings videos are going to update you on some more information that maybe we have found out and let you know specifically who to play. So let's go ahead and hop into it. Our first matchup is going to be that Thursday night matchup. Pittsburgh and Cleveland going at each other. Diontae Johnson, Amari Cooper, and Donovan Peoples-Jones are going to be my starts here. Cleveland has allowed the 7th most fantasy points right now to wide receiver. Johnson's getting all of the volume, a very high volume mark, even though his production isn't quite there yet. But then you've got Muth and Najee Harris is kind of the 2A and B that's getting the back end of all the targets there. So unfortunately, it's just not giving any upside to Claypool and Pickens. So we're not going to be able to start either of them for right now until we see maybe some of that volume pick up. But with Mitchell Trubisky starting, I don't know if it's going to pick up. That's always been a concern of ours. They just aren't able to go down the field, and that's where Chase Claypool has been so good in recent years. Amari Cooper, big bounce back last week. I told everybody looking at the tape that he was open consistently in week 1. Well, he got open again last week, and Jacoby Brissett found him more often. Pittsburgh allowing the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers right now. DPJ is still seeing a decent volume, and the potential is there. Now, the production hasn't been great, but I'll start, I think there's a potential for a big play. Going up against a defense that could end up, they're going to create some turnovers and they're going to do some things to mess with you. But the potential to get a big play against Pittsburgh is always going to be there. And that's where DPJ could be the most dangerous. New Orleans at Carolina. And this is really going to be a tough matchup. I mean, both of these defenses are top 10 right now and fewest fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. This could be a sloppy game for the wide receivers. It's really going to be hinged on, is someone going to score or not score? That's what we're looking for here. Now, Olave is going to be my only sit for New Orleans, and I know he's coming off a great game last week, but it is a risky start being matched up against J.C. Horn on the outside. He has the potential to lock down Olave. Really, his day is going to be make or break by a big touchdown. If he goes for like a 50-yard touchdown, he's going to be fine. But if he doesn't get that play, I don't know if he's going to have enough points to really be viable for your lineup. Michael Thomas is scoring touchdowns right now, so he's going to continue to be out there. His matchup on the other side is a little bit better. And Jarvis Landry in the slot, he's not going to have huge upside, but his floor potential for around 10 points will absolutely still be there, giving him a little bit better of a matchup in the slot. Now, for Carolina, DJ Moore is really going to be the only guy for me, and he's even a risky start at this point. The matchup is not great. Already mentioned that. Robbie Anderson is even more risky at this point at best. I expect Baker Mayfield, we're going to be trying to get the ball out quickly. That's what we're going to do against this defense, and that's how we're going to win some games against them. I think DJ Moore, we're going to get the ball out quickly. We're going to see a lot of CMC this week in the passing game, and everyone is going to have limited upside. Houston at Chicago, and for Houston, Brandon Cooks is going to be the only start for me this week in this game. The key really is going to be Davis Mills. If he gets enough time to throw, if he does, volume should be just fine for Brandon Cooks, but the offensive line is really going to have to keep the pocket clean for him and give him enough time to get the ball out to Cooks. Cooks is getting the targets right now. We just need some bigger plays. We need a little bit more production. When we start getting that, Cooks is going to be fine. The volume is there. For me, I would rather chase volume, hoping that production is going to come out. Now, on the flip side, Darnell Mooney isn't getting production or volume, so we're going to have to sit him this week. Houston does allow the 10th most fantasy points to wide receivers. And if the Bears actually threw it, Mooney will be the guy. But Justin Fields has attempted like 28 passing attempts over the first 2 games. That's inexcusable. Yeah, I know week 1 was crazy, but he only had 11 in week 2. Like, why are we not throwing the football? Did Chicago really make the right decision at head coach? We'll see. Listen carefully. Don't give up All right. A lot of people are going to see sit and they're just going to be completely off Darnell Mooney and they're going to want to move on. Do not drop him. Don't do anything with him. Just hold him for right now. If you're risk adverse and you're not interested in it, just set him this week. I get it. If you've got guys that you play in front of him, awesome. Do it. Set him on your bench. Get back to him next week. If you don't have anybody else to play, then potentially roll with it and what could be a good matchup that would actually get him going this week. For me personally, even though there's a 14 there and he's a sit based on the algorithm, I would probably still run him out in my lineup as my wide receiver 3. Kansas City and Indianapolis, another wide receiver that's struggling right now, Juju Smith-Schuster. If you're a member here on the channel, though, I did a film breakdown last week and went through why we are not giving up on Juju Smith-Schuster quite yet. And this week could end up being a breakout. Now, Juju is going to be insanely risky just based on what we've seen from him so far. But this week he could go for 15 plus or he could go for 2. So again, how risky are you feeling this week? MVS and Hardman, they're going to have the most difficult matchups on the outside. Juju will likely see Kenny Moore in 3 wide receiver sets. When he is in the slot, Kenny Moore typically also moves to nickel when they're in a 3 wide receiver set, and it hasn't been great for him. Kenny Moore is a good cornerback. He's just not great in the slot. A 149.3 passer rating allowed this year. 4th highest in the league amongst anybody covering slot wide receivers, and he's averaging 1.48 yards per snap. So for me, the opportunity for Juju to bounce back this week is absolutely going to be there. But again, kind of like with Darnell Mooney, if you're not trusting it, if you have other guys, other options, then watch him blow up on the bench, and then we'll go back to him next week. Michael Pittman, how healthy is he going to be? Right now, I've got him listed as, obviously kind of a question mark. Are we going to get him back this week? Kansas City has allowed the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers so far throughout the season. Hopefully Pittman's back. He's sorely needed, but if he is back this week, big game potential is right there for him. Buffalo at Miami, and this is going to be my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Don't forget, if you're going over to Manscaped to order yourself some products, use code word headliners, and you're going to get 20% off your entire purchase and free shipping. Manscaped.com, code word headliners. There are wide receivers galore in this matchup. Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, if we can get him back. We've got Jalen Waddle. We've got Tyreek Hill. The potential for an absolute shootout is here this week. Tons of wide receiver talent to watch, but is Miami for real? Can they keep up with a team like the Buffalo Bills? Can they go pound to pound for one of the best offenses in the league? There is going to be a lot to watch here. And for Gabe Davis, if he's healthy, we're going to fire him up this week. Throw him out there. Get him ready to go. Absolute dominating matchup in week 1. We got to get him back to there, obviously, in week 3, coming off his injury. And then the Bills, they've allowed the 7th fewest fantasy points right now to wide receivers. This is going to be a tough matchup. But are we going to sit 2 top 5 wide receivers or even consider it? Heck no. Get him in your lineup. Just know that the ceiling could be a little bit lower this week. Detroit at Minnesota, and Detroit's offense is just absolutely rolling right now. Philadelphia, they were able to dink and dunk on Minnesota a little bit, and maybe they weren't going for the big play down the field consistently, but they were throwing the ball, and they were just going with those nice, short, easy routes, high percentage completions, and it was working against Minnesota, allowing them to move the football. But I think Detroit's going to go a little bit more right at them and try to punch them in the mouth. Chark is going to be big play dependent, but if he can get loose for one, his day is going to be made. And again, if Detroit does do that, where they're looking to Hockenson and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they're really doing those high percentage plays, and they're establishing the run like they've already done this year, then all of a sudden, boom, DJ Chark deep could definitely be open, and he could have himself a decent day just because of that one play. For Minnesota, obviously, Justin Jefferson is going to be a start. A little bit of a down week last week. I'm sure he'll bounce back this week. Detroit is allowing the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Kind of a bend but don't break defense right now, where they're doing enough with pressure to kind of move the quarterback around and get some pressure on him, but they're going to give up some big plays, and they're going to give up, that's just the way that defense is right now until they get kind of another draft class through there to strengthen it and some more free agents. But Thielen hasn't had much upside because he hasn't scored yet. This could be that game, though. I know some of you are kind of concerned about Adam Thielen, but again, Going up against Detroit, this could be the situation where we do see him take that next step. Baltimore at New England, and as of this recording, Devin Duvernay has not cleared the concussion protocol. So we are going to be keeping an eye on him throughout the week. Now, if he clears, he does going to end up becoming a start for me. But there's a very important note on this slide right here that I want you to see. With Devin Duvernay, his volume right now is a 0 because he's not getting many targets. The production has been there, and obviously this past week he had a return touchdown, and depending on your league, because he got the touchdown, that's going to count for you. But with Devin Duvernay, if we get a little bit more production, he becomes more of a consistent start, and I don't know if we're getting that yet from him. So we're just going to continue to watch that. We want to see that production's great. We want to see that volume tick up a little bit closer to it. Now, if he clears, he becomes a start for me. Rashad Bateman, right now, he's a little bit big play dependent. I mean, over the last couple of weeks, he's had touchdown of 70 and 50 plus yards, which is great, but that's basically made his day. Now, that's not something that is 100% sustainable for me. You're going to have weeks, if we continue to do this, where he's just not going to have that big play and it's going to end up burning you. So again, I want to see us get a little bit more consistent there with that volume so we can bring those numbers closer together. So that does make him a little bit more of a consistent start and not so big play reliant. Nelson Agholor, Jakobi Meyers, both of them are going to be starts for me this week. Baltimore has allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers this season, and this is going to bring in my prize picks prop of the week. I'm going to go over Jakobi Meyers of 52.5 receiving yards. Now, go over to Prize Picks, download the app, create a free account, code word headliners when you do that, and they're going to match your deposit up to $100. So go do that, play along with us this week in Prize Picks. Let's see if we can win ourselves some money. But I'm going over with Jakobi Meyers. Good week last week. This is a really good matchup for him, and maybe the ceiling hasn't really been there, but the volume and the targets are. That should be more than enough to get us to that 52.5. I like that number on Prize Picks this week. Meyers is going to be safe. Agholor is going to be more of the big play dependent guy. He's not really a safe start. We see that production, that volume there, and because this is such a good matchup for him, it really escalates that start number up to 17. Just be aware that it's going to be a little bit more big play dependent. So if you're trying to risk something with Agholor this week, I might look to something a little bit safer. Cincinnati at the New York Jets, and we've got some really good wide receivers in this matchup, but we also have the potential for a very tough matchup as well. You know, one guy's going to get his in Cincinnati. We've already learned that over the course of the last couple of years, but we don't see both guys have huge days, right? It's either really Ja'Marr Chase or T. Higgins, and we saw it again over the last 2 weeks. Week 1, it was Ja'Marr Chase. Week 2, it was T. Higgins. Week 3, who is it going to be? No idea, but that doesn't matter because we have to start both of them, all right? You don't start you don't sit T. Higgins and you don't sit Ja'Marr Chase. You just always, and we talked about this during draft season, what do we need to be worried about with these guys? You just have to keep in mind that both of these guys, one's going to get his and one potentially won't, and you just have to be willing to work through those weeks. Now, for the New York Jets, I really sat and I contemplated this matchup for quite a while. Cincinnati allows the 6th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers over the first 2 weeks of the season. And the matchup may be tough, but obviously if that Cincinnati offense is going, New York's going to have to throw it a little bit as well. Now, Wilson has such big numbers, he's a start, but it's a highly volatile matchup against Mike Hilton, who's one of the better nickel corners in the league. If Wilson spends a majority of his day in the slot, which he has recently, that could end up causing some issues. Okay, we might see now the number 19 right there would show you that, yeah, it seems like it's a great matchup. And really, so far, the production and the volume are based off of 1 week last week, which was a huge week. Now, that could start to even itself back out, and we're not going to see those numbers anymore, which is why I'm telling everybody, again, this is a highly volatile matchup. If you're starting Garrett Wilson this week, just be prepared that if Hilton does lock him down and Flacco looks to Moore and Davis, a lot more often, you're going to have a bad number from him this week. Just keep that in mind starting him. Davis is really the matchup to me to watch on the outside with Eli Apple. Awuzie is going to be tough as well on the other side against Moore. So really for me, I think Corey Davis is going to make the week this week. Corey Davis is kind of my favorite most reliable start out of these three. Garrett Wilson still has the highest upside for me. And for Elijah Moore, really, he's still very risky right now because as we've seen for the first couple of weeks, he's kind of the odd man out in terms of getting the production right now. Las Vegas at Tennessee. Listen, Davante Adams, he's coming back this week. 25, perfect score going into week 3. Tennessee allows the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers after the Bills kind of knocked him around a little bit. So it would make sense that they're so poor right now. But I'm expecting a big bounce back here from Davante Adams. The Tennessee defense has been bad. But Renfrow was a tough start for me still, even with that. I mean, 2 fumbles last week was really, really tough. Darren Waller, obviously a better week last week. So Renfrow could very quickly become the number 3 option in this offense. And if that does happen, now we're a little bit concerned on what are we getting from him on a weekly basis. For Tennessee, I'm going to mention it now because I didn't mention him last week and people in the comments were trying to blow me up over it. Kyle Phillips, all right? I'm not listing him as of yet. He's still number 4 on the depth chart. He's behind Nick Westbrook-Ikhine still in terms of targets last week, but we aren't starting any of these wide receivers anyway. So if you're a Kyle Phillips truther out there and you're going to ask me about him, it doesn't matter. I'm not starting anybody that is a wide receiver from Tennessee until we see some improvements in that offense. Philadelphia at Washington. Washington has given up the 6th most fantasy points to wide receivers so far this season. But listen, what is going on with Philadelphia? Like, they're moving the ball well, and I'm going to go ahead and eat some of my preseason words. I mean, Jalen Hurts does look better. I mean, there are some throws that still really concern me that I feel like a quarterback that really has truly taken the next step will make. But those easy throws, those easy complete, he's making those right now. And that's what this offense is kind of built around. You know, that dink and dunk pass. If A.J. Brown is open down the field, we'll take a shot at him. We're going to move the football on the ground. Jalen Hurts is going to use his legs. If we get into the end zone, it's going to be a rushing touchdown. That's what this offense is doing right now. Watkins has the only receiving touchdown of the year so far, but they're still throwing it. I mean, right now, volume-wise, A.J. Brown has a 4. Devontae Smith only has a 1 because of only 4 targets in week 1, but he bounced back with a good week last week. I'm going to put both of these guys as starts going up against Washington, with Quez Watkins barely missing out as a start. Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, we got to start. I mean, how can you sit anyone in this matchup right now? Curtis Samuel is going to be the safest. McLaurin's going to have, in terms of the best floor and ceiling, he's going to be right in the middle of the other two. And then Jahan Dotson is going to be up here with his touchdown dependency. But you got to start all 3 of these guys right now. Philadelphia, you know, they're an offense or a defense, again, that in week 1, you kind of saw Detroit burn them a little bit. They kind of bounced back last week. What are we going to get from Washington this week? That's really going to tell us a lot about Philadelphia's defense. Jacksonville at the Los Angeles Chargers. Christian Kirk is going to be a start for me from Jacksonville. He's the only one, and he's earning that money, baby. A preseason guy for us that we were like, yeah, this is a sleeper. Like, we want Christian Kirk. A lot of people were kind of staying away from him because of how Jacksonville was last season, but they're utilizing him, and they're making him the main guy, and he is absolutely producing right now. I love it. Great job by Christian Kirk. And then, I mean, what's going on with Keenan Allen, man? I don't know. I don't know yet. If we get him back this week, he's going to be a start, but I don't know as of yet. So right now, I'm just going to put a 0 down for the injury and the X factor. We're going to put him as a 6. We're going to list him as a sit. If we hear anything else before, though, before we get to, Thursday and I do my rankings videos, we'll update you then, obviously, and keep you updated throughout the week. Mike Williams, he had a bounce back last week. Absolutely loved it. Great job by him. And then we'll keep an eye on Josh Palmer. If Keenan Allen does end up being out, then we might make a decision on Palmer to move him to a start. Going to continue to eye that a little bit more, though, and we'll talk about that later in the week. Los Angeles Rams and the Arizona Cardinals, and what, typically I would be like, oh, we got a shootout coming. Arizona's offense is kind of up and down so far to start the season, so we'll see what happens with that. A-Rob back into the start column after a nice showing in week 2. Get ready for it. He's getting better. The connection is going to be there with Matthew Stafford. Another film breakdown that I did to show you all why we were not giving up on A-Rob. And of course, the guy bounces back with the touchdown last week. More volume should start coming his way as well, especially in a matchup going up against Arizona where we hope they do score some points. And then obviously Cooper Kupp, he's going to continue to be a start. And then for the Arizona Cardinals, Greg Dortch ended up being very, very close. And I would like Dortch as a start this week, but the matchup against Kobe Durant in the slot is a little too risky for me. Durant's been pretty good so far, and I think that there is an opportunity here where we see kind of a little bit of a tougher matchup where maybe, Kyler Murray just cannot get the ball to Dortch on a consistent basis. And if that doesn't happen, even though he's had volume so far this season, the worry is that you start a guy like Greg Dortch out of nowhere, and now it's like, he bombs for you because it was a tougher matchup. So, but if he puts together a big game here on your bench, then he's a guy that we're absolutely going to be starting until DeAndre Hopkins gets back and we see how that works out. Brown will have a decent matchup on the outside against David Long. Kind of that big playability is still going to be there. So I'll go with Marquise Brown this week. Dortch is very, very, very close, though. We'll see in week 4 if we start relying on him a little more. Atlanta at Seattle, and this is going to be the battle of the bland quarterbacks. That's what I'm going to call them, because that's what Marcus Mariota and Geno Smith are, the bland quarterbacks. They don't do anything crazy, but so far this season, they haven't been awful either. They're just kind of, They're vanilla ice cream with no toppings. London's starting to establish himself with volume and production. Seattle's defense hasn't given up a much to wide receivers yet so far this year. But London could still have a solid performance. I mean, Seattle's defense to me is one that when I look at it, it does look like it has an opportunity to be better than what we've seen, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself either. Now, obviously week 1 going up against going up against Denver and Russell Wilson, they may have played a little bit above what we actually might see for them. So we'll continue to kind of monitor that. Drake London, for me, he's got the production, he's got the volume. The matchup isn't really there either. And he's a guy who's been really banged up. So I still have his injury rating a little bit on the lower side right now, because I just want to make sure this is a guy that continues to stay healthy. He is the number 1 in this offense right now, though. So based on those factors alone, he is kind of a high risk, high upside kind of start for me. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of upside this week, but I definitely think he has a game where he goes, maybe 8 targets, 5 receptions, 60 yards or something like that. So if you can live with that, you'll be just fine. If you're expecting wide receiver 1 numbers, he might not get those this week. For Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, the targets are there. The production hasn't been, but this is too good of a matchup going up against this Atlanta team that's given up quite a bit of points at times this season. So for me, we're still going to roll with them. It's highly volatile. Tyler Lockett, again, kind of the same Tyler Lockett that we've always seen. He's going to have some really, really good games. He's going to have some games that are down here. DK Metcalf continues to be the main guy in this offense for me, though. Targets are coming his way. Volume is still there. Just hasn't really turned into any production yet. If he can score this week, though, it's all going to be made for you. Green Bay at Tampa Bay, the battle of the Bays. Lazard, Watkins, Doubs, Gage, Jones, lots of sits in this matchup for a couple of different reasons. For Green Bay, the ball is just being spread around way too much. They're literally trying to target every single person in that offense every single game. The days of having the guy in this offense are gone. That's no more. And then also with these 3 guys on here, you also have to throw in Christian Watson, who's a part of that. A.J. Dillon's getting targets. Robert Tunyon's getting targets. Aaron Jones is getting targets. Really, the only guy out of all of these that we feel like, hey, he might have some upside when they start, it's going to be Allen Lazard because he's the touchdown guy. But he scored a touchdown last week and he didn't do anything else. It's just, that offense is kind of a mess. It's kind of a mess. But it's 2022 right now, and the year of the crazy fantasy world is still continuing, and Green Bay not having that guy just makes sense. It makes sense this year. For Tampa Bay, as of this recording, Mike Evans' suspension had been heard, his appeal had been heard, but no decision had been rendered. I don't know if he's playing this week as of this recording. So you're just going to have to come back for the rankings, because honestly, when I take a look at this, I don't know really what to tell you. Perryman's going to be in the mix. Scotty Miller's going to be in the mix. If Evans isn't suspended, then obviously he's going to be a start. If he is suspended, who's going to kind of step in at that point? Is Jones going to be healthy? Gage has been beat up. Tampa Bay. Ice your boys up, Tampa Bay. Come on. You're all hurt right now. San Francisco at Denver, and Denver has allowed the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers this season. But look who they've played. I'm not sitting either of these guys. Now, Ayuk's numbers here does say sit, and you're going to be like, well, Kyle, why have him as a sit if you're going to say have him as a start? Well, because the algorithm that we have developed to kind of help us make these decisions a little bit easier and paint a better picture for you, it's not that good right now because his production and his volume is going to be down. No, I'm going with Brandon. If I own Brandon Aiyuk, I am starting him this week. If y'all don't trust it and if y'all just don't want to do, then don't. If it's me and my team, unless I have an option that has a way better ceiling than Aiyuk, I'm going to play Aiyuk this week, and I don't care what the algorithm says. The algorithm does tell us to start Sutton and Jeudy, though, and that is what we're going to do because, listen, those guys are getting decent volume right now, and yes, Russell Wilson hasn't been great in his first 2 games, but it's just, again, it's one of those situations. These offenses are going to start a little bit slower when we've seen kind of a new NFL where preseason and training camp take a back seat to really pushing out gameplay, all right? It's more about individual drills. It's more about, working in t-shirts and shorts and doing walkthroughs. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm not knocking the NFL for that at all whatsoever. Whatever we can do to keep guys healthier throughout a 17-game schedule, I'm for that. So I'm not worried about any of that. But it's just the reality that we live in with the NFL now, where if in training camp and the preseason, we're not seeing guys play significant snaps in high leverage situations, it's going to take some time during the regular season, and we're just going to have to wait through that. Russell Wilson's a great quarterback. This is a great offense. We're going to see them start to roll very soon. Jeudy and Sutton are both going to be starts for me this week. And to wrap things up on Monday Night Football, I mean, could we get a worse matchup? Dallas and New York. New York fans, calm down. As soon as I said that, I could see you all mentally, Kyle, you suck. Why are you talking bad about? I could see you typing it. Just calm down. Okay. Lamb's going to be a start for me this week. CeeDee Lamb finally saw the volume come his way, and Noah Brown is kind of coming out of nowhere. Okay. So for me, Noah Brown, not quite a start yet. Okay. The New York Giants, they've allowed the second fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but kind of like the same thing I said with the last matchup. They haven't really faced anybody where you would say, man, these are blowout teams. Like, these are guys with high leverage offenses. And again, you've got Cooper Rush starting for the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know what to expect from him this week. The only thing I do know is that CeeDee Lamb is going to continue to get targets. So if we're being safe about it, we're going to go to CeeDee Lamb. If you're wanting to get like super crazy, which in week 3, I'm not, you can go with Noah Brown. I'm not going to start him though this week because CeeDee Lamb is still going to be the guy. Now, do we go to Noah Brown if Dalton Schultz is going to be out? We'll talk about that in the wide receiver rankings if more news comes out or in the live shows. So continue to monitor that situation. And for the New York Giants, I mean, Shep is the only guy that I trust in New York. I mean, he was a favorite of Daniel Jones last year before the injury. He seems to be coming back to be a favorite of him right now. He's the only one really seeing the targets. I mean, Kadarius Toney isn't even getting on the field consistently. Richie James is playing more over Kenny Golladay, who has the highest cap hit of any wide receiver in the NFL. I mean, the Giants are really kind of a mess right now, and because of that, I'm really kind of stepping back away from this offense, but the numbers do show that in a matchup like this going up against Dallas, Sterling Shepard, he could be a guy that you start this week, and the ceiling might not be that high, but he might have a decent floor. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. My start and sit analysis for the wide receiver position here in week 3. Hit the like button for me. Subscribe if you're new here to the channel. Leave a comment down below if you got any questions. Don't forget, rankings come out on Thursday, so they'll be able to help you out with a lot of these questions and give you updates on any of the injury information that we discussed today. But appreciate everybody tuning into this video. Peace out, stay safe and healthy, and I'll catch y'all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.